Jack here, JBF Music and Guitar Lessons. In this signature guitar licks we're looking at Yngwie Malmsteen and the Phrygian dominant. I'm going to go into a bit of detail regarding that scale and some of the theory around it, so if that doesn't interest you and you just want the licks, just use the timestamps in the pinned comment or the video description to go to the part that's most relevant to yourself. Okay, so like I said, first up, delving into the theory. I'm going to keep this as brief as possible while also hopefully explaining what's going on. If I don't do a good job or you want a deeper explanation or just more theory, let me know in the comments. Phrygian dominant is the fifth mode of the harmonic minor. If we take a harmonic minor, we can see that the fifth note is an E. Now to put it simply, a mode is just an inverted scale. That is a scale starting and ending on a different note. In this example, instead of going from A to A, which would be A, B, C, D, E, F, G sharp A, we'll be going from E. E, F, G sharp A, B, C, D, E. If you look at those scales there, hopefully you can see that these two modes share all the same notes. The main reason you would use a mode is if that's what the chord underneath suggests. So for example, if we have a riff on A minor, the first mode, say it was something like this. However, say we have a riff based in E using the Phrygian dominant this time. Using that mode and resolving to the chord tones of E should work better. It's called the Phrygian dominant because it's almost identical to the Phrygian mode. Except the Phrygian dominant has one note different, the third. This major third means that it is in fact a major scale. If we look at building the chord, we get E, G sharp, that's the major third, and B. If we extend this to become a seventh chord, it becomes E, G sharp, B, D, and E dominant seventh chord. Hence the dominant part of Phrygian dominant. Now if we extend this further, it becomes sort of ninth. We get E, G sharp, B, D, F, which gives us an E dominant 7 flat 9. The group of notes G sharp, B, D and F actually form a diminished seventh. This is an odd little chord. All the intervals are a minor third away from each other. If I play it on one string, this should become fairly apparent. What this means is that the chord inverts into itself, using the same chord shape almost as if by magic. So if we take this common shape for it, arranged as G sharp, D, F, B, all the right notes just not stacked in thirds, otherwise you'd have to play it a bit like this, which isn't that much fun at all. But yeah, with this nicer shape, we can move it up a minor third, and the notes just sort of rotate around because, as we just found out, all the notes are a minor third apart. So let's move it up and double check this. A minor third is 3 semitones, so if we go to here, we get B, F, G sharp, D. Again, the same notes, just in a different order from the bottom to the top. Alright, let's shift it up another minor third. 1, 2, 3. D, G sharp, B, F. Yeah, all the usual suspects there as well. And if we go up another flat third, 1, 2, 3, we get F, B, D, G sharp. All good so far, so what about the next one? G sharp, D, F, B. Which you might have noticed is the same as the first one we started on, just an octave higher. Because this chord splits an octave perfectly into 4 equal segments, this means we get 4 inversions of the chord within each octave. Okay, this is all starting to sound a bit jazzy, so what's this got to do with the Phrygian dominant? Well, the classic Yngwie diminished sweep, to see that in action, check out this Yngwie 3-string sweep system video, card on the top right. This thing will work well over this kind of Phrygian thing, as it implies the dominant 7 flat 9, which we just touched on there. And when Malmsteen uses this diminished sweep, a lot of the time this is what he's doing. We'll get a practical example of this towards the end of the lesson with a lick, but in a nutshell, E Phrygian dominant will work over some sort of Phrygian or Phrygian dominant riff, and E, E7 or E7 flat 9, or the following diminished 7th chords: G sharp diminished 7, D diminished 7, F diminished 7, and B diminished 7. For a more tense sound, as a rule of thumb, you can build this diminished chord from any of the intervals from an E7 flat 9, except the root. So you could build it from the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, and the flat 9, because they're all the minor third apart. If you play that yourself, it might make a bit more sense. Similarly, we could play any of those diminished shapes over an E Phrygian dominant riff, an E7, and an E7 flat 9. In terms of chord progressions, the resolution from an E7 to an A minor, a very common thing to do, will sound like this. Whereas the E7 flat 9 to the A minor will sound like this. It's more tense because of the flat 9, that note, but because of that it also has a stronger pull for the A minor chord. A bit more evil, a bit more metal, a bit more neoclassical. A very stock Phrygian dominant riff in metal might be something like in bars 1 and 2. Now you might notice this note on the 6th fret is out of key. In practice this just adds a bit more crunch. In terms of the theory, we are making a G sharp diminished into G sharp minor by using this perfect 5th instead of the flat 5 which would come from the harmonic minor scale. I mean, you could play the G with a flat 5, so you get... But in metal, using a power chord is generally a bit more common. Tritones may be a bit more kind of goth or experimental metal. Similarly, we could have a Phrygian riff rather than Phrygian dominant, so this time with the flat 3rd in bars 3 and 4. And we can still use a Phrygian dominant to solo over this riff. The tension between the two generally just creates a nice kind of angry, unsettled vibe. You can even combine the G sharp power chord with the standard Phrygian one to get a hybrid scale for riffing, like bars 5 and 6. Again, very stock stuff from me here and somewhat uninspiring, but hopefully clear enough to convey what's going on here. And yet, just like before, the Phrygian dominant will usually sound pretty good over that kind of thing as well. For reference, here is one fingering of the Phrygian dominant. If you want to learn this all over the fretboard, check out the scale demo and explanation with the card in the top right. But for now, a quick recap before moving on. Phrygian dominant is the 5th mode of the harmonic minor scale. A mode is just an inverted scale, so starting and ending on a different note but using the same set of notes. The chord this scale makes is an E dominant 7, which is where the dominant part comes from. If we extend it, the chord becomes an E dominant 7 flat 9. Where this is most relevant is that over an E or an E7, we can use the diminished scale to create this extension, and it will sound pretty cool and neoclassical. We can use the Phrygian dominant over a Phrygian riff in metal. And the 3rd chord of Phrygian dominant, G sharp in this instance, if that's being played as a power chord, the scale will sound alright as well. And on to the licks. Lick 1, using Yngwie's 4s. For more on that, check out my Yngwie Pro Tips tutorial, lesson card in the top right. But yeah, we're just going down the Phrygian dominant scale in a simple repeating pattern, going down 6 degrees through the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And visualizing these blocks always really helps me remember licks like this a lot better, so that's something I would suggest doing. And then we're coming back up it using the same kind of 4-note grouping, starting on the 6th fret, but this time we're just going up 4 degrees of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then going down across the strings to resolve to the root. Again, simply going through the scale note by note. You can pick or legato this as much as you want. Live, Yngwie will chop and change stuff like this as he sees fit, which I think is probably a good thing. You know, being able to play it however you want, so if you know it's too fast, if the drummer's maybe a bit eager that night, or if you're not properly warmed up, your picking hand can just rely on your legato and that sort of thing. I'm just pulling off the 10th fret to the 8th on the B string, so I can keep a downward pick slant throughout this. Anyway, the important things here are what notes stick out, so primarily where you start and where you end. I'm starting on E, or root. This lick sort of turnaround could be thought of as another point of interest as well, and you'll notice here, this pattern of 4 starts on the G sharp, which we learned from the intro is E's major 3rd, fitting nicely into the Phrygian dominant sound we're trying to capture. And like I said, I started on the root, hit the 3rd part of the way through when we turned around, and then I ended the lick on the root as well. Lick number 2. Okay, so if you watch the intro theory bit, this is where this stuff really starts to pay off. If not, you can always use the timestamps to jump back or look at a later time if this isn't making sense. Here, the notes are 5th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 4th, 3rd. Then the same idea moved down the scale onto the B string, here. We're really honing on the 10th side of Phrygian dominant with the flat 2nd, which we could think of as a flat 9 from the chord when it gets extended to the dominant 7 flat 9. Then we get the flat 7, root, flat 2nd, root, flat 7. So even though we're just playing these 3 notes, they can really help reinforce that implied dominant 7 flat 9 chord. So there I was just letting the E string drone out and playing that over the top, so you can hopefully hear that it is kind of invoking that kind of chord without doing too much. That kind of exotic Eastern sound as it's often referred to. Yngwie will sometimes pick all the notes in licks like these, or use legato. I opted for a combination. It's really up to you what you do, but here I picked the first 4 notes and then just pulled off, and just the same idea on the B string, again picking the first 4 notes and then pulling off. So this idea is repeated twice really. Then we have the start of it the same. Then what I'm doing is going down the scale. So flat 2nd, root, flat 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd. So this 3rd you might want to pick, you might want to just slide down into. Both are very Malmsteenian things to do, if that's even a word. And ending a Phrygian dominant lick on the 3rd. This is really nice strong resolution and is a very common thing for Yngwie to do. Alright, bonus trick time. First up, if we take out that 4th, what we can get is essentially a dominant 7 flat 9 arpeggio, but feels and sounds way more like a scale run. Okay, so here we're going from the 5th down to the 3rd, flat 2nd, root, flat 7th, root, flat 2nd, 3rd. Then I repeat that, and then again. And then to get down to the next octave, I just repeated this flat 2nd, root, flat 7th. And then we got exactly the same idea, just down an octave. 5th, 3rd, flat 2nd, root, flat 7th, root, flat 2nd, 3rd. And repeating that the same again. So the only changes at the end, I kind of did this. So it was root, flat 2nd, flat 7th, then root to resolve it. We could also take that picking pattern from the main lick and use it on a different scale shape, like this one. Starting on the G sharp, we have the 3rd, root, flat 2nd, 3rd, flat 2nd, root. On the next string, the flat 6th, 4th, 5th, flat 6th, 5th, 4th. Then this phrase happens again. And then we get this one more time. And then instead of going onto the B string, we go down onto the D string. Going with the flat 7th, 5th, flat 6th, flat 7th, flat 6th, 5th, sliding up to the root again an octave higher, and then a flat 7th being bent up to the root an octave higher again. This octave jumping thing is probably a bit more common in Yngwie's live improvisations than studio solos. He often does this on one string and with a bend. Check out the card on the top right for a quick guitar tricks lesson on that. As another bonus trick, with that last lick, you could double up each string playing it for twice as long. This lick in particular would work really well going from an E7 to an A minor, which is a major 5 or dominant 5 to minor 1 chord progression. The last idea I'm going to suggest with this lick, and let's face it, we managed to milk it pretty well so far, is just to play it in a different octave. So let's go an octave higher. The main change here is that to round it up, I've opted to go outside of the scale for this last bend. Here, bar 1 would be an E7, and then the second bar would resolve to an A minor. That's what note I'm targeting with this bend. An A. Now, this isn't really a lesson on following chords. You can check out my Slash tutorial on how he solos over chord progressions with the card on the top right. Although this is an important topic, I do want to address it, and in all fairness, we will touch on it a bit later on. Starting off with a trill between the 3rd and the 4th. Trilling like that is pretty typical of Yngwie and a great neoclassical trick. A bit of a bonus tip there. The timing here, the phrasing, we're holding this 13th fret for a little bit longer, the one that we slide into. It's textbook Yngwie. It's also pretty handy for improvising because holding this note for a tiny fraction of a second longer gives you a little bit more time to think and also change the strings. Because we're doing legato here. The tricky part is that the first 3 sets of triplets are split somewhat unintuitively over the strings. You can see this in the tab where the triplets are. They don't conform to the standard 3 note per string triplet trick that we're used to until those last 2. It's not the end of the world, but this thing took me a while to work out the timing, way back when I started learning Yngwie stuff. So just to expand on what I mean a little bit more there, we're playing this note, and then try to think of the triplet groupings. Triplet, 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 triplet. So this note, and then you have the groups of 3. There's one, there's another, there's another, and then luckily that one does conform to the 3-note per string kind of triplet trick, and we're ending here. This is another thing, Yngwie will often have quite odd phrasing, so this is a difficult lick to do because it doesn't end on what we considered like a normal beat of the bar, you just kind of go down to it. This is one that you want to get nice and slow and steady and in the bag, and then when you have that, it'll kind of feel a lot more natural playing it up at speed. Anyway, back on track. That first bit of legato starts on the flat 2nd, root, flat 7th, onto the next string we have the flat 6th, 5th, 4th, onto the G string we have G sharp, or major 3rd, and then, oh wait, I know what's happened here, G. Surely that's not right, flat 3rd. Well, if you cast your mind back to when I was talking about overlapping notes between the Phrygian dominant and its plagal cousin Phrygian being just fine for rhythm or riffing, here we can see it works pretty well for lead playing too. It just adds a kind of spicy pizzazz to the solo. We then continue down the scale, we have the flat 2nd, root, flat 7th, flat 6th, 5th, 4th, and then 3rd. Again using that 3rd to resolve the lick. So a point to highlight here, consider using that flat 3rd from time to time, particularly if it makes the fingering easier like it does here. If you use it too much, it will just sound like Phrygian or a bit weird, but used here and there it can be pretty cool. Tell you what, let's do some bonus licks as well. So some legato variations of this basic idea could be like this. So in bar 1, I'm just running down the scale starting on the flat 2nd. And then for a little edge ending on that 3rd. Bar 2 goes like this. Almost identical. We start on the flat 2nd, again sliding into it. This time, when we go down to the 3rd on the D string, on the 6th fret here, and then going for the 5th, 4th, 3rd, just for a bit of variation, and then continuing down the scale from this flat 2nd on the 8th fret, on the A string, resolving to the 5th, that 7th fret on the A string. I mean, you could milk the small sequence idea in bar 2 if you wanted and take it up and down the string. You'd have something like. Try and get that a bit cleaner. You know, so it's just to show that even with something like this, you can add in the kind of sequence ideas we looked at before and move it up and down as you go. And finally, this lick is admittedly much more in the style of than the previous ones. Here, the main idea is following chords. You might notice that bar 1 is just outlining inversions of an A minor arpeggio, A minor being the 1 chord of E7 being R5. This is a great way to add movement to a static chord, and it sounds much more vibrant than just staying in one arpeggio box. But it is much harder to improvise. Okay, so if we break down the intervals, just a quick reminder here, this is in relation to A minor since that's the chord we're following just now. All the rest of this has been in E, so it might take a second for your brain to readjust. But we start on the flat third, go up to the fifth, the root, flat third, fifth, back down to the flat third, fifth, root. Then we're jumping to a different position for A minor, starting on the root, going up to the fifth, but then we have the flat third I should say, sorry, the root, and then we're jumping to another position again, starting on the flat third, root, fifth, flat third. Bar 2 is where the chord changes to E7 for that Phrygian dominant sound, which you can see with the overlay in the tab. Just to highlight here, we've gone back to E7, so the intervals are now referring to the E7 chord rather than the A minor from the previous section here. So we start off by sliding down into the fifth, then we have root, third, fifth, third, root, fifth, sliding into the third, an octave lower. We're then implying the dominant 7 flat 9 with our tasty little diminished sweep for the remainder of the bar. We've got the 5, flat 7, flat second, third, flat second, flat 7th, 5th, 3rd, and then resolving to A for bar 3, where our underlying chord has again transitioned back to the A minor. Now there are a few different ways you could tackle picking this. Obviously some type of sweep picking is probably necessary. The way I'm picking it, you can do your own thing, but this might help out. I'm going down, 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 then an up with the pull off, 2 ups. Then I'm starting these little sweeps on a down, pull off, up, up. Same here, down, pull off, up, up. Then we slide, and I'm going to go down, down, up, pull off, up, up. Then we have to slide, and then it'll be down, 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 up, pull off, up, up, down, and resolve to the root. The main thing with sweep picking is deciding how you're going to play kind of this note. Like, I think of it as kind of the turnaround when you're playing it on the E string, how you're going to pick, because you could pick these with an up, pull off, and then do another up, but I seem to prefer doing a down. I'm not entirely sure why. But that's just what seems to work for me. You might find something different yourself, and if you do, leave it in the comments because there's a good chance it could help someone else out. Those were some Yngwie Malmsteen Phrygian dominant guitar lines. This has been Signature Guitar Licks, that's the playlist there. For more Malmsteen tips, check out this lesson. If you enjoy this, want to stay up to date with the channel, help it out, hit subscribe, share, like, comment, and enable notifications with that little bell on the side if you feel so inclined. Cheers guys.